Let's cross-send live to Jerusalem. We're going to speak to our correspondent who joins us from there, Noga Tarnopolsky. Noga, bring us first then a sense of the reaction there from politicians to the people.
Good morning, Stuart. Well, it's a holiday here. No one is going to work. It's the Jewish New Year. And so reaction has been significantly more muted than it was when the UK made a similar announcement just 2 days ago. And Israeli officials ended up calling UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer a supporter of Nazis. So this time has been a bit muted. The Israeli government clearly is on the back foot here because Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has made it his calling card to promise Israelis that there will never, ever be a Palestinian state. And even if a majority of Israelis don't follow him in that direction, he has made this promise to his most extremist ministers, who probably are a majority of his ministers these days, and his diminished cabinet. And as a result, in order to maintain power for the next year before there are mandated elections in Israel, and in order to hold on to his hope of being able to still control the powers, the levers of power in Israel, at least for the next year, Netanyahu has to satisfy these ministers. They are calling for the Israeli imposition of sovereignty over the occupied West Bank as a punitive response against Western nations who have declared their recognition of a Palestinian state. The newspaper Haaretz, an opposition newspaper, today is headlined its editorial with an article, a column, detailing how, in fact, announcing this sort of sovereignty would punish Israel and not Western states. But the reality is that Prime Minister Netanyahu right now has boxed himself in to a certain extent. He does not have the votes in parliament. You need a supermajority in the Israeli parliament, in the Knesset, in order to annex any territory. He doesn't have the votes. So the best he could probably do for these most hardline ministers is declare some sort of sovereignty without actually voting on annexation. But he needs a U.S. okay even to do that. Gulf nations like the United Arab Emirates that have ties, diplomatic ties to Israel, created through the Trump-sponsored Abraham Accords, have said that that would break the accords from their point of view. So Netanyahu is now going to Washington, D.C., a little bit kind of with hat in hand, to request U.S. permission to do something which de facto would wreck President Trump's top foreign policy achievement from his first term. So it's a bit of a complicated situation. The Israeli people, the regular people on the street here, are in fact paying very little attention, if any at all, to all of these declarations across the ocean. The preoccupation among regular Israelis is with this grinding, ongoing war. A seventh soldier was declared dead this morning, the seventh this week. The hostages preoccupy Israelis, and their head is completely elsewhere.
Noga, realistically, of course, on the ground, as you indicated there, none of these moves by other countries are making any difference. I mean, the advance into Gaza City, possibly beyond grinds on.
That's right. None of this has an immediate effect on the ground, but we shouldn't be blind to the effect that it could have moving forward. This recognition will have an impact. At some point, this war will have to end. And at that point, recognition of Palestine as a state will have a significant impact. And Israel's, for example, any Israeli actions in Gaza and possibly even in the West Bank could be considered by all of these countries, the UK and France, among, the most important among them, as extra legal actions within the territory of a recognized state. This could even further complicate Israel's diplomatic isolation and certainly complicate the political life of Prime Minister Netanyahu, who, having again promised Israelis there would never be a Palestinian state, is now sort of appearing as an emperor without his clothes on. His diplomatic stance has failed, and he will at some point have to explain that.
Noga, thanks very much. Noga Tarnopolsky, our correspondent, joining us live there from Jerusalem.